Hi, so the purpose of this video is to tackle one of the most important skills that you want to work on as a critical thinker, which is organization. One of the things that a critical thinker can do is look at a task that they have before them and break it down into the parts to really ensure that they're able to go through and meet all assignment requirements. It is a skill that's sometimes difficult, but it is invaluable to be able to break down your expectations and make a plan based on them. So that's something that you really want to work on, and I'm going to look at a couple prompts that are great opportunities to do so. So if you look at something like the Unit 1 Thesis and Outline Planner assignment, you can see that you're going to be creating a planner to address one of these three prompts. So we have three prompts here, and the first instruction is to choose one. When we're looking through these, you'll see that there are several questions asked in each. One thing that is a good idea is to think about how you are going to answer these questions and how you're going to organize them. The good news is for this particular assignment, the best piece of advice I have for organization is to write a 5-paragraph essay. You know, when you're supposed to write a 5-paragraph essay, that means you're going to end up with 3 body paragraphs and you're going to end up with an introduction and a conclusion so that you make 5 paragraphs. When you're going through, that means that what you need to do is figure out what you're going to talk about in each of those 3 paragraphs. So if I am a good critical thinker and I'm approaching this particular task, I'm looking and I'm reading through and I'm deciding which one I would like to talk about. There's 3 to choose from here. You can see that the first one says, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Okay, that's a good opener. That's some background they've given us in this prompt, but we don't actually need to do anything with that sentence. Here is something we need to do. Our first instruction is to reflect on a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. One of the reasons I chose this prompt to talk about first is because those are 3 very different things. A lot of times when we read something like that, we tend to lump things together and say, well, okay, well, it was really challenging when I got in over my head at work and took on a really big project and did really poorly on it and had to sort of explain myself and be embarrassed. That's a lot of different things that are happening there. When you're getting ready to write a paper on a particular subject like this paper, you really want to isolate a specific thing. So a challenge is not necessarily the same thing as a setback or a failure. You want to get a really clear idea. Which one am I talking about? One of the reasons you want to get a really clear idea is because when you're creating your thesis statement, you're going to want to know what your topic is. You're going to have a much clearer paper if you're saying, okay, the topic is specifically this risk I decided to take. Not an example of a whole bunch of risky behavior that you might have engaged with in the past, not what you're not aiming for an entire story where you're just narrating what happened to you. You really want to pick a specific choice or a specific challenge, setback, or failure and focus on that. That's one of the reasons I had you post, or that I want you to post on the discussion board, because it can be really helpful to articulate what you're thinking about, because in your mind you might have a really clear idea, but if you don't focus it on a specific thing that you really want to talk about and explain what you learned and what happened, your paper can turn into a story. And one thing I want to emphasize about this particular assignment, this critical thinking paper, this Unit 1 critical thinking paper, is that you need to have a thesis and you need to have supporting points. There's no thesis or supporting points in a narrative reflection. You guys aren't just writing 5 paragraphs talking about what happened with some loose observations about what you could have done better thrown in. You're going to be writing a really focused, organized paragraph where you use personal experience as the basis for explaining something that you learned, something that you gained from doing or from experiencing these things that you're talking about. So it's important to have an idea of what exactly you want to choose. So if you're picking that first prompt, you need to be able to tell me if you've chosen a challenge, a failure, or a setback, not just all 3 kind of like lumped together in a situation. Because it's going to help you with the idea for your thesis statement. So a thesis statement is sometimes called a main idea. And you can see that the way that you construct a main idea is by taking your topic, what you want to say about it, and that's what creates your main idea. So if you are writing something really broad, like I'm trying to think of examples, my 6 years of experience in the military, or after 14 years of being a stay-at-home mom, I've learned a lot. Those are going to be too big to kind of tackle with your take on it, because you are going to end up with something. If your topic is 14 years staying at home or staying with your kids as a stay-at-home mom, if that's your topic, your take is going to be, I learned a lot, because boy, did you ever. That's 14 years of your life. I would hope you learned a lot. You're not trying to explain all the different things you learned over a period of a situation. You're trying to talk about you're trying to isolate one specific event and explain how that event taught you something specific, or showed you something specific, or was totally worth the risk. So that's a little bit about isolating a main idea. And the same goes for if you're picking that third prompt where you're talking about something that you lose track of all time in, you need to have a really clear idea of what that is. If you say like things related to cars, you could write a whole book about all the different things about cars that you're interested in. Pick something. If you're going to talk about how you lose yourself in the process of building a vintage car back up from scratch, that is more specific than the thing I can lose myself in is cars. You need something, a narrower focus to explain this, or to create this main idea. So if we go back to the prompt, once, for instance, you've chosen prompt number 1 as an example, you're going to have your introduction and your conclusion. Your introduction will give a hook. It will give some background to just give us, to kind of transition us into the idea of what you're talking about. 1 sentence, 2 max. And then your thesis statement will come. And if you need to write your paper before you come up with your thesis statement, that's fine too. Sometimes that has to happen. But so your introduction is going to be at least 3 sentences. You're going to follow the formula in that planner. When you go to write the body paragraphs, it's going to ask you for topic sentences. Sometimes people don't know what to put there. My suggestion is answer these questions. So here, the very first thing says, reflect on a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. And I told you to choose one. In your first paragraph, explain, reflect on, talk about this challenge, setback, or failure. This is your chance to incorporate the details, to explain, okay, in the summer of 2019, I did X, Y, and Z. Here's what happened. Here, that's where you're going to explain this challenge, this setback, or this failure, so that the reader has context. Everything you want to say about the details of it, and then this happened, and I wasn't prepared for it, and also this happened, all of that needs to go in that single paragraph. The next paragraph should be dedicated to answering the question, how did it affect you? And the paragraph after that, what did you learn from the experience? See how I broke that prompt down? That's what I want you guys to do all the time. Every time you write a paragraph, it should be about something. It shouldn't just be like, here's everything I think. A paragraph should start with a topic sentence that explains what you are going to do in that paragraph. If you don't come up with a plan for what you're going to do in all your paragraphs beforehand, they're always going to be hard to write. They're frequently going to be repetitive, and they're often going to sound like, here's every thought I've ever had. Think about how to break your paper down and organize it before you even start it. So, how did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? There are 3 tasks in this prompt. You need to write 3 paragraphs. Do with that what you will. How did it affect you? You could even have, so your first body paragraph would be your summary of reflecting on the time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. You can choose one. Your second body paragraph could even start with, this experience affected me because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Third paragraph, from this experience, I learned da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Write these sentences into your planner so that you stay on track. If we're going to talk about the second one and break it down, tell about a time where you had to make a choice to either take a risk or stay safe. All right, so here we're starting straight from the get-go. Our first instruction is to tell about a time where you had to make a choice to either take a risk or stay safe. That should be the basis of your first paragraph. Your first paragraph should tell about that time. What did you do? What happened? Would you do it again? We've got multiple questions here. So it's going to be a little bit harder to break it down necessarily than the first one. But really, what did you do kind of goes along with you telling about the time where you had to make a choice to either take a risk or stay safe. The other questions, what happened? Would you do it again? So my recommendation would be to start by explaining the scenario. Maybe in your first body paragraph, explain the scenario. In your second body paragraph, explain what you chose to do and what happened. And in your third, explain would you do it again and why or why not? What did you learn? That's kind of like a would you do it again is implied that you're going to explain, well, I learned this and therefore I would do it again, or therefore I would not do it again. One way to think about these essays is to think about them as if they are sort of along the lines of like college admission essays. The point of these is to reflect on something that happened to you, not to just tell the reader like a story about what happened to you, but to look back on something that happened to you and gain meaning from it. So here, the third one, and this one is a little bit different, and I honestly think that topic 3 is the hardest. So just prepare yourself. That I think it's the hardest to organize, and it's one of the hardest to execute well. You can still do it by all means, but just be warned that you're going to need to really approach this in an organized fashion. Describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Again, get specific. Are you talking about a topic? Are you talking about an idea? Are you talking about a concept? Be sure you really know which of these you're talking about. And so here, your first task is to describe this topic, this idea, or this concept. Think about this as maybe some background for people who don't know what you're talking about. So for instance, in the past, I've had students who talk about anime shows or the world of anime, leading them to kind of learning to draw. So in that case, if your topic is anime, you might need to give a little bit of background. For your second paragraph, think about answering this question, why does it captivate you? That's really going to be a lot of the place where you're going to do some of the self-reflection. So your topic sentence for this paragraph might even start, one reason I'm so captivated by this is it allows me to express my creativity. It allows me to follow my passion. Whatever you want to say, this is where you're going to get really reflective, or because it teaches me important life lessons. This is where you're really going to want to put in a lot of that reflective work. And then what or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? That's going to be the question that I would, if I were writing prompt number 3. This is the space where I would kind of explain, I would have a topic sentence maybe, when I want to learn more about my topic, I always go to this website, or one of my favorite people to go to is this author. That's where you're going to kind of explain like what, or the place that I go is always the community that is also interested in this. So that's something that you want to think about for that third paragraph if you're doing this prompt. But you can see that all of these have questions, and you want to make sure when you're approaching a task that you're looking at the prompt, because often the prompt is going to guide you and tell you what you need to include. So if you want to see an example of how I did this, I took the risk question and I posted a sample.